Hi, welcome back to SDG 12. Today we're going to interview Ruxandra Iancu, a computational and spatial designer, as well as one of my teachers and co-founder of 50 Super Real, the studio where we are right now. I'm very happy to interview you, so let's go. First question. You started your career in the field of architecture and then went to computational design. How did that happen?
I did study architecture, this is true, but it's very compatible with the idea of computational design. Computational design is nothing else than using digital tools to get to a certain result. So obviously in architecture and design, you use a lot of those software, a lot of the digital logics and digital tools, and you can choose to have more or less of that in your creative process. And I chose to have a lot of it in my creative process.
So we could say from what we've learned from you that you really like algorithms and you use them for your projects. How would you describe algorithmic driven design?
I mean, there's many different ways that people have decided to define this. For me, or at least for us in the studio, algorithmic driven design is a way that we can actually be sustainable and respond to certain needs in a very efficient and adaptive way. So it's a question of what are the parameters that you infuse your design with. So if it's ecological parameters and you create something in that sense, then you infuse your design with those values. For me, and you know from class, I don't think algorithms are necessarily digital. I actually love analog algorithmic thinking and logic and relationships in that way. But the fact that we use digital tools allows us to create a data set that would be beyond human, not comprehension, but beyond the scope of capabilities to create something. So this is why that step is important. In many ways, I think all design is somehow algorithmic driven design, because you have a series of steps, you have a series of rules, you're responding to certain prompts in one way or another. When somebody who does craftsmanship, creating something, they have a series of iterations of the same steps. They have a series, something in mind. So it's a very complex algorithm, that one, but for me it's still like, in a way, algorithmic. No? If it has a set of rules, it's an algorithm.
So you said before adaptive. Can you talk, you've probably been interviewed a million times, but your project Adapta, which was crazy, it was a result of COVID, no?
It was a result of, it was a response to COVID, but it wasn't created out of COVID. So that algorithm that created emergency hospitals, it's always important to mention this because hospitals have way more regulations than an emergency hospital. Mm-hmm. So the fact that it has like about a third of the regulations, an emergency...
Gives you more freedom to experiment.
It was faster. It was faster to input all of that regulation inside, but it's actually a recycled algorithm that we created for social housing previous to that.
Okay.
So before it was doing hospitals, it was doing very cheap apartments.
About other examples of algorithmic driven design that you've done apart from that?
So purely generative, the ones that would create these plans, they're usually for housing, or we even done a school in that sense, everything that has a set of rules that you can repeat. Yeah. And schools and even houses, there's always a certain logic to it that you can somehow convert into a mathematical function. You never enter your apartment through the bathroom, no? No. And there's certain rules, and then inside those rules, people create something. So with that, that's where we use it a lot, with things that have a pattern. And then we use a lot of computational design or parametric, generative. There's so many words that they mean slightly different things when we do environmental modeling, for example. So we would create designs that respond specifically to the environmental parameters of a certain place and time. And then that could adapt everywhere in different places. So we don't think about the formal in the sense of, this would look good here, but this would perform better here. Yeah. And in another place, a version of that would perform better. So we think about performance in terms of how it responds to solar radiation and so many parameters.
It's context.
Exactly.
So this work you've done with your studio, 50 Super Real, can I ask why the name?
Oh, well, it's actually on topic, because there was, for a very long time, there were articles saying that in 2050 the world is going to burn, no? The climate change would become unbearable. So for us it was okay, so this is like super real. So it's also when we want to retire, but it's also to kind of remind ourselves that 2050 is super real. Yeah.
And it's really close.
So it's that was the inspiration, but then it was also the overimposing of the layer of digital on reality, so it becomes like a super reality, a more complex, more highly resolution reality that we can work with. So it has a lot of reasons. It sounds very strange, and we know that,
That's really cool.
but it has a lot of reasons in the sense of it's an ecological turn and a digital turn as well.
Yeah. Okay. So your work mainly targets social and ecological impact. Has that been one of your concerns from early on, or did you develop that later?
I think my personal one, I think social issues have been the ones that have driven me when I was younger. And later, the ecological layer came on because it became a social issue.
Yeah.
So automatically, I kind of adopted that as well. It was always the well-being of human, of the human, has always been something very interesting for me. So in when I was younger, so many years ago, when I was studying, you would think of the well-being of the human inside very complex socio-economic and economical like contexts. But the more time passed, the more the well-being depended on ecological or environmental values and how everything is changing. So it just became a very important pillar of our work, because we know we need humans to be happy, I think.
Have you ever seen the intended results of a project directly happen? Like it's probably easier in the social aspect rather than the environmental one.
We've seen it in the environmental one.
Really?
We've seen what computational logics and a lot of analysis can do to the environment, to the built environment. We've seen what properly thinking about a certain placement of a certain angle can do to the reduction of temperature in a space, and we managed to reduce the temperature naturally just by properly designing that room by 2 or 3 degrees, and that seems like not a lot, but it's exactly enough to be in the zone of comfort without any mechanical or energy consumption at all. And there's logics in the passive way. We've seen well-placed and well-designed and well-responsive designs that can produce a lot of electricity, a lot of energy, not electricity. So we've seen it, I think, more in the environmental bit, because for us it's measurable, like it's numbers. You can measure the impact. Measuring social impact, because I'm not a sociologist, I wouldn't know how to do. I would just ask, "Are you happy with this result?" But we like things that we can measure and that are quantifiable. So environment is data, and you can measure your impact easily. All you have to do is want it. So
crazy. So relating to your creative flow, when you target a project, do you apply the same methodologies when it's a consulting or like a commissioned work than when it's one of your research projects?
Well, I don't know. I think we approach everything with the tools that it needs. Every project is very different. We know the professional methodology might change. I think the human methodology doesn't. You approach every project with a lot of anxiety and fear that you're not going to do well, and then you have to start to slowly understand it and make it yours, and like gain confidence that you can do something good with it. But in the professional world, because we have such a wide array of projects, from very small things at the level of materiality to urban things, everything needs something different. But if I had to like make an abstract process of it, I think it's usually the same overall steps. A lot of investigation, a lot of research, a lot of trying different things and seeing just throwing things out there and seeing what sticks and what works. So, and it's maybe a very chaotic process, but when you do that, you kind of get new ideas. So it's just throwing ideas at the problem.
Yeah. Which of your projects or skills, in fact, I would really like if you give one of each, are you most proud of?
Oh.
Yeah.
Project, I don't know.
Or skills?
Ooh, it's even harder. I think I'm not proud of the way that it turned out, but I'm proud of where it took me. When I was a student in my master's, I did in Catalonia. I did a small project related to paper that was not the brief, and the professors were not happy with it. But the process in that one was trying to get to the same result in such a tangent way to what they actually wanted, and it was so there was a methodology behind it, and I just stuck to it. And now when I look back, the results are not great because, well,
they probably were.
No, they were fine. But the approach to it, I think I'm very proud of. I think I'm very proud of not going the normal route and trying something very different. Trying to, rather than resolve a problem, trying to curate a factory that resolves problems instead of trying to create a mechanism that can grow rather than a punctual thing. So when I took that route, obviously, I had to go through through the jungle of ideas and trying and failing. But I did like the idea of never creating for one particular spot or one particular situation. And that's where it kind of all started, like, okay, how do you apply this everywhere in the world? How would this happen? Like, what are the parameters that I need to change? And it was a very analog and stupid, silly project.
You're the one that introduced us to the whole modular system thing, and I feel like that's something that we try to implement in almost all of our projects. It has a lot of potential.
Adaptive things that are agile. We speak a lot about agile thinking, but not so much about agile things. No? So I think this is kind of one of the many directions that we need to develop. No?
Okay.
I wouldn't be able to tell you a favorite skill because I don't feel I'm skilled enough at anything. I'm very dispersed. And that's good and bad.
I can cut it out of things. You don't want to show it.
No, I because first of all, it feels very smug to say that I'm very good at this. I'm not very.
But maybe it's a skill that you really work to develop.
Well, it's not a skill. It's actually a negative trait of mine that I foolishly believe I can learn anything. Very foolishly, because some things I tried and I couldn't.
It's dangerous, but at the same time super interesting.
I think if I have to.
Confidence is key.
No, but it's not out of confidence. I just think if I just keep at it, I'm going to figure it out. And there's many things that I tried and it didn't work. But the fact that I was like, if I read enough books, I think I'm going to grasp this idea better or this. So that's kind of this is the reason why we have so many projects in so many different directions, because we stupidly believe we can. I think we can approach this.
We can get close to it better than nothing.
We could have a different vision or a different approach, and I think that's a bad thing because sometimes we get into things we shouldn't. But it's a good thing because it keeps us very curious.
So this question is completely related to SDG 12. So, do you consider yourself a conscious consumer, and why?
Yeah, completely.
How?
I limit toxic consumerism completely. I still haven't. I don't know if you remember from when you were in the first year. I still have only 100 objects of clothing, for example. I still keep that rule of not. And that includes socks. No,
includes socks.
Includes it. I only have a very well, so I can only buy new things if something is really not wearable anymore, and that's a self-limitation to kind of educate myself to not go to this is so pretty. Yes, so that's one. I don't drive a car. I only take public transportation. I eat rather locally as much as I can, and no red meat. So my own life within
Limiting footprint.
it's trying in a very nice way. I invest in good technology in my home, that I have an eco program to wash those 100 pieces of clothing. So that's as consumers, I think it's as much as we can do.
Yeah.
You can't ask people to do more than that, I think, because you have to still keep them comfortable. No? So as a consumer, I'm pretty, as much as I can.
But that's so much effort, like compared, like I think I'm a conscious consumer and I don't do like half of the things that you do. So
I think that the textile industry is one of the ones that is easy to tackle with, because we know how toxic it is and we know how appearances and trends work.
Yeah.
So
amazing. Okay, so what advice would you give to designers trying to have an impact?
What kind of impact?
The ones that you tackle, social or ecological?
Empathy. That is the only thing. And empathy goes a long way. Empathy, we have natural, or we should have natural empathy towards other humans. But we have to start to understand how to have empathy towards objects, other species, a very biodiverse empathy system. To care, for a human being, and to care and to feel its pain. The same kind of logic must apply to the way that you care for your things, the way that you care for your environment, and understanding its needs, and truly going through a critical thinking process where you take your decisions from an empathy place, from a good, from a good, soft, nice place, So empathy, if you have that, then processes will come, skills will come. But it has to come not from an egomaniac space of, it has to come from a place that has nothing to do with you. It has to do with everything else but you. And when you remove yourself, you tame the ego, you become a bit smaller. You feel a bit like this, but you treat things in a different way. Maybe you're not so, but you are more.
Better.
Just a little bit of cariño. Con cariño. Towards everything. And when you do things like that, it changes the way that you see, the way you produce things.
That's really good advice. And one last question.
Oh God.
Can you recommend me a movie?
Oh Lord. No, I'm the worst person to do that.
No.
Because I watch very nerdy, very, very nerdy.
Nerdy one.
A movie regarding sustainability.
No, just a movie. Any movie that you want to recommend.
I think, there's many. I don't know which one.
I'm asking because I listened to, I loved it, Richie's podcast, and you talk about a lot about like Blade Runner, like androids and stuff. Like I'm thinking if there's any other movie that made you reflect on topics that you can apply to projects, or even like research and thinking.
There are two. One is, and it's a very silly, very simple movie that shouldn't be the favorite movie of anyone, which is Take Shelter. Yes, Take Shelter. It's Michael Shannon. He's a fantastic man, and it's all about somebody having an intuition that something is going to go bad, but not being able to express and communicate that way. So, and then something does happen, but the process of convincing the world around you that you have an intuition. So I think intuition is something that designers or architects or creators in general, they work with a lot, and it's hard to fully send that message. You just know.
Yeah, but you never trust it enough.
You don't trust it. Everybody's telling you that you're no, maybe not, no, and it's really hard to deal with that. And that's a movie that deals with intuition in a different way, but it deals with this quiet. There's a disquiet inside of the book of Disquiet by Pessoa. It's a little bit like that. And then another one that I found, and it's very popular, so on extreme ends, is Her. Because of the relationship with technology that we have, not because of the idea, oh, look, we can have a relationship with an AI. That is interesting. but the design of the technology in the movie is, for me, some of the best. It's just unintrusive.
You don't see it.
You don't see technology. It just fluidly integrates into your life. It's exactly how technology should be, and not like this, like the way it is now. And I think it's one of the very few aesthetically pleasing pieces that show technology in a way that still allows for human life. Usually futuristic movies are about huge androids and blue lights and shiny things. And this is the only one that said, no, technology can be more humane in that sense. So that's why I love it. The story leaving it behind, but the integration of technology in the future, I thought this is a very sensible approach. So yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much. I really enjoyed this interview. I'm going to leave all your information to see Ruxandra's work below, and keep tuned to see more SDG 12 interviews.